I want to welcome you all. I'm Dr. Sarah McGee. For those that don't know me, I am the chair of the communication department here, which is sponsoring, along with the Career Center, this sort of path to multimedia, storytelling, and all of its different shapes and forms. We've got some fantastic panelists here. Hopefully we will have Tony if we're able to get her as we get started. But they represent a lot of different areas in the industry of communication. All of them are Loyola grads. They were all where you were at one point in time. And they're all back because they want to share their stories, and then afterwards they want to talk to you and get to know you and meet you and become great network and career connections, whether you're looking for jobs, internships, or just to get a sense of what kinds of things you can do in the field of communication. So I'm just going to start by saying give them a round of applause because they all came down to join us here. And I could sit here and you could hear my voice introducing them all, but I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves, start briefly, just tell a little bit who they are, maybe when you graduated, and what you do now, and then we'll kind of move on from there. So whoever wants to start, I'm not sure who has the microphones along here. So, Christina?
Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Napoli. I graduated in 2019. I was a digital media major. I had a minor in marketing as well. Currently, I'm an associate producer at Fox Sports, specifically the show First Things First on FS1. After graduation, I had some experiences doing some various jobs we can get into later at Loyola. And when I graduated, I was lucky enough to get a job at ESPN, which has kind of catapulted my career here. But yes, associate producer, so I'm in production and television.
Hi, I'm Jade Benson-Smith. I graduated in the cursed year of 2020. I currently work as a producer in advertising, but I have been a producer in multiple capacities. So I've also post-produced and I also line produce, just in advertising in general.
Hey everyone, I'm Daphne Ciccarelli. I graduated in 2021, second most cursed year. And I previously was the brand creator and experiences lead at Squarespace. And I actually just am starting a new role as the community manager at a startup called Songfinch. So before Squarespace, I was working in like tech startups, and I kind of do like a mixture of brand and creator marketing, and it's super fun.
If you guys have that, you guys have yours. Yep.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, I am Nick Brown. I graduated 2007, and I am an enterprise and investigative reporter at Reuters. I don't have a particular beat right now. Basically, I sort of jump from project to project, whatever the big story is of the day. I'll do sort of the enterprise deep dive on it. For example, during the pandemic, I wasn't the person who was going to break the news that the FDA had authorized the vaccine, but I was the person who then did, a month-long investigation on, the efforts to build up the trust, especially in communities of color. So that's me. I've covered obviously a lot of things before that. I imagine we'll get more into that later, so I'll let Nick go.
Hi everyone, I'm the other Nick, class of 2018. I'm a segment producer and booking producer with ABC News Good Morning America, so we're in the journalism corner over here. Basically what I do is I help secure the interviews and guests for our shows across Good Morning America and the entire ABC network. Involved in that is, any sort of news of the day. I focus on a lot of crime, politics, space news, which is big now. So I studied journalism and political science at Loyola. Really glad to be back here and talking to all you guys.
All right, so one more time. Tony, do you happen to be there? Okay. Tony's calling in. All right. Yes. Well, hopefully if Tony we see her pop in and do it. Tony is our other panelist who has done a lot with social media, YouTube, et cetera, and so I'm hoping she will be able to join us. As we see her pop in, if somebody sees her before me, just like wave and point. But thank you all. So the way I like to kind of open this, and anyone out there that knows me, probably is familiar with this kind of question, I want to start by asking you each, what's the thing right now that you would say you find most rewarding about the job you do? So I don't know who wants to take us away and start it, but what's the most rewarding thing about the job you do?
This is probably not as deep and meaningful of an answer as expected, but seeing some of my work run on TV is probably the most rewarding thing I've experienced. My first highlight on SportsCenter was like the best day of my life. That was just kind of the day that I was like, oh, this is exactly my dream job. Like, I don't know how I got here, but I do because of Loyola. We'll get into that later. But just kind of seeing my work get paid off in a visual way, I would say, is the most rewarding for me.
Hang on, I see Tony here. Tony, are you able to hear us? Oh, we're seeing you, but I'm not hearing you. Hang on, I'm looking at our audio, guys. Are we? Keep talking, Tony. We're trying to get your microphone going. I'm assuming you're, thumbs up if you're hearing me. No. All right. Hopefully, Tony, if you're seeing me, stay with us. We're working, and we'll try to get you up. Anyone, just let me know if in the back if there's anything, if it comes up or what we're doing. But this is Tony. She will hopefully be able to hear us and start to talk. So while we are waiting for that and working on that, Jade, you want to continue asking your most meaningful?
Yeah. I just wanted to bounce off of Christina. Seeing my first commercial on TV was really huge. And on top of that, just seeing a project start from a concept, and then as a producer, you being a big part of getting it to where it needs to be at that end point. And you just think sometimes, like, how am I going to make this happen? And then somehow you do. It's really cool.
I could probably say the same thing as you guys. Seeing it all pay off is really great. But to just switch it up, one of the things that I love the most about my job, like I said, I work with creators and influencers and talent. And so one of the things that I love most is just building really genuine connections with these people and also having the ability to connect them to other people. It just is really rewarding and feels really good when you're able to not only benefit the brand that you're working with, but the creator as well and help build them up.
I guess I'd say shedding light on previously unknown facets of what's going on in our country, you know, and not only shedding light for readers, but for myself. You know, I think journalism really can be an antidote to ignorance. It kind of forces you to engage with the world. It forces you to sort of dive deep into things you don't understand, which I think we could all use a little more of. So to get paid to do that is incredibly rewarding. And yeah, I love that's what I love about it.
Yeah, and I really like what Jade said, you know, just kind of figuring out, oh my God, how is this going to make it, and finally seeing like a finished project of a segment that you're working on, or like an interview that you're trying to lock down for weeks, maybe even months, and finally getting it to air where you know hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of people are going to watch it, and hopefully learn something and be informed by your coverage and work. It's really rewarding to see, you know, a small pitch or idea go from just a couple of emails, maybe we should be covering this, to a full-fledged segment that ends up on our networks. It's really fun and exciting, and sometimes stressful, but really rewarding to see it all come together at the end.
I'm hearing something, or is that Tony? Are we hearing Tony? I'm just checking. Hang on, I'm getting a hold on here. As you can see, the joy of technology as we're all we're working with Zoom. Any luck? Tony, any luck hearing?
It's going to be another minute.
Okay, all right. Well, then while we are waiting, Tony, we will get to you. I guess kind of following off on all of that, these are all various, you know, rising, you know, sophomores, first year sophomores, juniors, seniors. What would you say Loyola did to prepare you for this career? Hopefully we prepared you for this career, all doing well, but what would you say was something that you found that Loyola did to prepare you for your career in these fields?
I'll start over here. You know, I always say, and this is what I always tell for like prospective students that I talk to, and you know, other alumni and like friends and all. The thing I loved about Loyola so much is the relationships you can build with your professors, the faculty, the other students, because I think, you know, something that Loyola talks about a lot is our like smaller class size. So you're able to get more intimate relationships with your professors, and that's something that's really going to help you in your career, and you know, especially in communications, if you're pursuing something in communications or multimedia. being able to have good personal connections with people is the most important thing. And I think that's something that Loyola was really good about instilling in a lot of students, especially in the communications and media. You know, those students that really try and build those connections and network and like search things out are the ones who really succeed. And Loyola is kind of pretty well rounded in being able to do that for students.
I would say the same thing too. Oh, sorry. The Loyola network of alumni is extremely strong, and I know they always said that when I was at Loyola, but now I actually believe it. There's been many times when I've applied to jobs or just wanted to reach out to connect, and I say like, hey, I see you went to Loyola, would love to connect, learn more about your role and your experience, and I would say like 10 out of 10 times they'll always answer me, and I can get people on a call and just to chat and network. And Loyola people will also definitely advocate for other Loyola people when it comes to open roles and things too, so it's always a good thing to have.
I was thinking, obviously, I agree with everything that's been said so far, but for me, it was the sheer amount of opportunities on campus to get involved in. I was telling everyone earlier, with my schedule, I was only able to do Graycom, something I really wanted to do, for 2 months, maybe 3. Down the road, I was able to find an opportunity with the athletics department doing video editing for them. So if something doesn't work out for you, there's always something else to fall back on. And it may have to be something that you search for and really put in the work to find, but it's there. And I think that's really special.
Yeah, and I would love to double down on club activities geared toward your interests. Graycom was a huge part of my success at Loyola. I worked there for 4 years, and I learned such a great foundation of everything I know now, and everything that I've done there applies to everything I do at work. So whether it's not TV production you're interested in, maybe PRSSA or even advertising, anything like that, just to get involved, you'll learn so much from actually going to clubs that interest you.
I'll name just a few very concrete things. A lot of it for me goes back to Kevin Addix, Maryland Agriculture Secretary Kevin Addix. I took his that too. I took his journalism class, and we had to. He gave us beats, and I think mine was like the Sellinger School or something, and I had to come up with a really interesting story about the Sellinger School, which was a stretch, but I did it. And it was good to learn about beat writing that way. He also was instrumental in helping me get an internship at the Baltimore Sun. I have to say I did not appreciate it at the time because I was like 20 years old and I didn't have anything to compare it to, and I was like, cool, I guess this is what college is. I'm supposed to do this. But that's like a really big paper, and to have been able to get real newsroom experience with almost like no qualifications whatsoever was an incredible opportunity that actually did, from the clips I gathered there, have a direct impact on me getting future jobs. Sometimes those opportunities, you don't realize how important they were for you for like 10, 15 years, and then you're like, oh wow, that was really huge. The last thing I'll say too, obviously I was on the Greyhound, I was the opinions editor. We called for the removal of the student body president over something. I got a lot of backlash. I think somebody posted on social media, we should throw Nick Brown off the Charles Street Bridge, which was a great, prepared me for some of the vitriol today that journalists receive. So it was, it was kind of a microcosm for what my future was going to be in many ways. So yeah, it was great.
All right, Tony, are you hearing us now? Are we able to hear you? Oh, okay. Hang on. I know. All right. She's unmuted.
It needs to be on mute.
Oh, is the TV mute? Guys, they say the TV's muted?
I think her Zoom is muted.
That's a different computer. She's
Oh,
hearing through this computer.
okay. But Tony, you're hearing us now? But we just can't hear her. This is going to be the tech panel. All right. Okay, well, You guys are still working on it back there?
Still working on it.
All right. Okay, well, we will continue. And Tony, I promise as soon as we get you up, we will let you, make a note of the questions to do that, and we will hear from you. So you've talked a little bit about, what Loyola did for you, what your experiences are like. What advice? I know that students will probably ask you questions and things, but if you had one piece of advice to give to students wanting to go out in this career field, in work in general, what kind of advice or what piece of advice would you give them based on your experiences, the world we're living in, the world you're working in? What would you give them as your best advice?
I'll start off. I would say my best piece of advice would be don't be afraid to ask questions. Even if you think you know the answer, it doesn't hurt to ask because you would be surprised how much more you'd learn if you just take the time to ask a question.
Just a bit of backstory on what led me to my most recent role. So I was actually unfortunately laid off of Squarespace a couple weeks ago as a part of the big layoffs that have been happening in tech. So unfortunate, obviously, but definitely see it as an opportunity now. So I would say biggest thing is right now, if you guys are about to graduate this year, you're graduating into a recession. It's tough out there to get a job, let alone hold it. And the thing that you can really do to help yourself is just really advocate for yourself and be extremely resilient. Nobody is going to advocate for you more than you are going to. So whether that means reaching out to 1 million people from the company you want to work at and trying to get them all on the phone and connect with them, or posting on LinkedIn all the time, trying to make connections there, whatever it is, advocating for yourself is really just the most important thing you can do. And yeah, I definitely would agree with Jade. Ask questions and put yourself out there. Be open-minded. Everything works out. So.
Yeah, and jumping off that's such a great thing to say. Advocating for yourself and not being let down if, say, that dream job that you applied to for different times doesn't work out. Keep going. Be willing to say yes to new options that present themselves. Be open to new opportunities. Be available. That's probably in the communications and media world. That's the most important thing. It might be discouraging if you're a senior and you're seeing your friends and fellow students in, say, the business school. They usually have a more kind of direct track when it comes to careers. It doesn't necessarily work that same way if you're looking for a media job. You just have to be open for those opportunities as they arise. You have to be willing to search them out. And again, just to reemphasize, don't be discouraged if you don't get that first job. Continue to apply, continue to build up your resume, and keep going. Like I said, those people in the communications department who are driven and willing to, put in the work and put in the hours are the ones who succeed.
Completely agree with don't get discouraged. Kind of going off of that, don't compare yourself to anybody, whether it's somebody in a different career path or somebody in your career path, in the industry, not in the industry. Similar to what Nick said, I lived with all finance majors. They all had jobs by October of 2018, and I didn't have a job by the time I graduated in 2019. Do not compare yourself. Your path will be your path for a reason, and it'll be worth it. And then another thing I have to say is just keep an open mind on anything. Also, like Nick said, apply. My first job was actually a program, so it was a full-time job, but it was within a program. So I was under a management, rotational program, similar to an internship. Don't be discouraged if it's labeled an internship or if it's labeled a program. Still apply. Any experience is good experience, whether you hate it or you love it. You'll learn something, and that's the most important thing in this industry, especially, obviously in life, but I find in the communications industry, the more you learn. And one more very quick anecdote, somebody I worked with, off the bat, my first job, first week I found out she was 32 and she was a math tutor for the last 10 years of her life, and she just had a switch of heart and wanted to be in television production, and she worked to get some credits and get where I was too. So again, don't compare, keep an open mind, and wherever you'll end up is for a reason.
Yeah, that's all great advice. If journalism is what you're going into, there are a couple things I think really would make you stand out. One is writing. I think there's a sense among some that writing doesn't matter anymore because everybody tweets the news and everybody only reads the headline, but it's not true. these are really complex topics in a really complex time. And if you can break them down in ways that people can understand, editors will love reading your copy. And, whoa. And I mentioned earlier this idea of journalism being an antidote to ignorance. Maintain a sense of intellectual curiosity. Editors will really like that too, when it looks like you're really interested in learning more about what you're doing. And the last thing I'd say, this is kind of a wild card, but I think honestly human empathy and compassion is really important in journalism. Not only because you are trying to tell a human story and people are not cliches. Very few of us are actually true heroes or villains. So the ability to portray people in that muddy middle, but also, getting people to talk to you. People don't want to talk to you. They're not going to want to talk to you. And you know what's going to make them talk to you? If they feel like they can trust you. So that's what I would say is going to make you stand out.
I really love what you just said, having the human empathy. Obviously in the journalism world, your job as a journalist, as a reporter, is to get people to basically spill their life stories and have millions of people watch it on TV or read an article based on it. And, being able to connect with them at an individual level and empathize with them, as Nick said, is pretty much the most important part. My job in booking interviews is very, very interpersonal. That's the main thing of the job, is basically being able to convince people who may have just been through a really tragic experience and having them tell their story. And I've had instances where there are some guests or interview subjects that we want to cover on our show who are being approached by dozens, if not multiple dozens of other news organizations and networks. And the thing that sets apart myself and some of our colleagues is emphasizing that we are human beings too. We want to give them the space to tell their story, and being able to kind of show them that we want to help. Empathy is the biggest part. It's called communications for a reason.
Okay, we're still working on Tony. All right, Tony, bear with us, you're hearing it. We're getting there. So continuing kind of along this vein, you've all kind of talked about some of the Loyola experiences. Now I'm going to ask you each, if you have to take a moment about it, what's one of the most memorable experiences or stories you have from the jobs and the things that you've done? I know the big snowball question, if you had to say you all are doing different things in interesting ways at different companies, different organizations, different amounts of time. Do you have a story? Maybe it's a good story, maybe it's a cautionary tale, but the most interesting thing or something interesting or a good memory or a story, that sticks out to you, sort of also to demonstrate your experience or hear, or something that didn't go right too. Sometimes those are the best stories.
So this is one of my personal favorite stories about when everything went wrong. So in my first job out of college, I was working at a fintech startup called Nate. And it was like a payments and shopping app. You could create lists, you could send gifts, you could purchase things with one tap. And so my job there was to do a mix of a bunch of things. It was a very early stage startup, so I was doing social media, I was doing creator and influencer marketing, brand marketing, and then I started to get into experiential marketing, which is like the pop-ups and the mobile activations and that kind of bringing the brand to life side of everything. And so one of the first things that I did in my role doing experiential marketing was take the brand across the country from New York to California, and kind of bring it to life there. We were doing this whole tour of college campuses, and we were going around to different cities in California, and we were planning on running this mobile activation that the original plan was that it was going to be this big box truck, and the back of it was going to be completely clear, and inside of the back of it we would have these money-blowing machines, and people could go in, catch money, and whatever they won we would add to their account, so then they could go and spend it online shopping. And a month before we were supposed to go to LA, our production company was like, listen, it's just not going to be done in time. There's no way, we have to pull out. So we're like, all right, we've got a month to get this together. What can we do? So my colleague and I start trying to find other production agencies, and we're reaching out to people and getting on calls, trying to figure out who can get this done in time. We have to ditch the original idea. We finally find this one company, and they're like, we can't do that, but what we can do is a truck that pulls this giant slot machine on the back. And we're like, you know what? Okay, sure, I guess. Like, that'll work, it'll do. And it was the same idea. You pull the slot machine, it lands on whatever, and you get the prize. And so we had like multiple Zoom calls with these people. We were sending prototypes back and forth and blueprints of this and that, and like every little tweak that we had, they would edit for us. And so we were like, all right, awesome, we're good to go. We get to LA, and we're supposed to go to this commissary to pick up the truck. And the morning of, they call us and they're like, hey, we actually need one more day. And we're like, okay, like if you say so. I don't know what we're gonna do today, but like we'll just prep today and make some swag bags or something. And so the next morning comes, and we're calling them and calling them and calling them, and they are not answering us, not answering our emails. So we're like, oh no, oh, this is not good. So my colleague and I got in the car, and we drove to where the commissary was supposed to be. Turns out it was a UPS, and it was a PO box. And we had been scammed out of this whole experiential mobile activation. And so now we're in LA. We're like, we have 10 days here, and we have to figure out what we're gonna do. So we ended up just putting our heads together. There were like 6 of us there, and we were reaching out to like local coffee shops and local like food trucks and things like that, Greek life on campus, and just forming these like local partnerships with student groups and local businesses. And it ended up being a huge success, but it was obviously very awful when we got there and found out we had been scammed out of an entire truck, and that was literally our whole plan for the trip there. But it worked out. Teamwork, being on your feet, and just being able to adapt and be ready for change is super important, especially in this industry. So that's my crazy story. But it's really funny now.
It is, but at the time, at the time, that's what you do. You work to make sure, you have to do what you have to do.
Yeah, it was terrifying, and I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna lose my job. But I didn't. It was fine. And so now it's one of my favorite stories to tell, because I'm like, you know what? Everything worked out. It's all fine. Everything's gonna work out.
The spiel.
Yeah, and so even like just carrying that on into the type of things that I do now, whether it's like consumer-facing events or creator events, if something goes wrong, I'm like, nothing can go wrong as horribly as it did that one time, so I just can keep my cool now and try to enjoy the moment.
Life experiences.
Yeah.
What other stories do you guys have?
Well, I'll piggyback on the idea of talking about the bad things, and then I'll talk about some good things. But yeah, my first job out of college sucked. It was like, I got it, a friend of mine who was on the Greyhound with me helped me get it, and it was this small paper in the New York area that I won't name because it was so horrible. It was like abusive and corrupt, and the editor used to just copy and paste press releases, stick it in the file, put her name on it, and call it a story. And the editor, she once said to me, you better write well because I'm too tired to edit. And she also once said to me, I know you have a family and everything, but if you go home for Christmas, you're screwing up my paper. Anyway, and my beat was like the mafia. Like I was covering a part of Queens that's just all mafia, and I was like a 22-year-old kid. I got fired, moved home with my parents, and you know what? I'm here now. So the point is, don't worry about it. But I guess a good story is just one thing I've really enjoyed doing. This job has allowed me to kind of parachute into big stories. Every now and then a hurricane will strike or some crazy thing will happen, and I'll just get a call that'll say like, hey, can you get on a plane and go, into this place. And it's real, it's gut churn, it's scary, it never stops being a little bit scary. But I really like that. I like that part of it. I was our Puerto Rico bureau chief for a while, so when Hurricane Maria hit, I was like very deep into that. And it was obviously a very painful story, but there was something so sort of freeing and validating about the autonomy of just driving around this disaster area with no cell reception, just looking for stories and being trusted to do that and come back with something good. And that is an opportunity that you really don't get in a lot of other industries, so I've really enjoyed that piece of it.
I have like a most memorable day at work that's like not a super great story, and then like a really fun one. The day that the helicopter crash that killed Kobe and Gianna Bryant was the most autopilot I think I've ever been in my life. And for that, it was a very memorable day at work for a horrible, horrible reason. I would never wish, obviously, that to happen to anybody, but I never want a day at work for anybody like that again. It was really, I don't like to use the word wild, but it was wild when SportsCenter aired that night, seeing that we were able to get what we were able to get done for the show was both devastating and a really good example of teamwork, I thought. Nobody spoke a word that day. Everybody was dead silent. We got our assignments and we just did it. And our talent handled the broadcast exceptionally well. I don't know how any of them were able to speak so eloquently. So that was always very memorable to me for the wrong reason. But a lighter note was I had the opportunity to go to the NBA Finals. And at that point, I was off of SportsCenter. I was working in our digital department. So our show, because it was a smaller scale social show, we were able to actually be on the court during warm-ups. And we had this really awesome idea that at the time I was a content associate, the associate producer and I worked for like 8.5 hours straight on. It was pitched at like 8 a.m. We had it done by 4 p.m. It's getting ready to run on air. We were live streaming everything. And then one of the NBA players came and just grabbed the microphone and was talking. And so we didn't run it. So that was painful. But it was funny. And it was worth it because it was amazing content. Obviously, an NBA player overshadows anything that I could create. So it was really fun and just that experience was like incredible.
I have two kind of silly stories. I used to work on a fast food brand account, and I always found myself in the weirdest situations. And now that I think about it, I'm like, how did we get here? But I was working in South Carolina, and for this one production, they wanted a slot machine where chicken tenders would fly out of it. And if you don't know about South Carolina, it is illegal to own a slot machine for personal use there. And so I'm on the phone with people in Ohio trying to get a slot machine, and they will not ship it to us. And we had to come up with this roundabout scheme to ship it to somewhere in North Carolina, put it in a truck, drive it down to set, and then remove it from South Carolina within 24 hours. I'm like, how did I get myself in this problem? And it's a really cool shot, and there's chicken tenders that fly out of it. It's really fun. The second one is the same fast food account. And this was for a social media ad that they were doing. And they were launching a new chicken sandwich. So they wanted to poke fun at all of the other fast food brands that had a chicken sandwich, one of them being Chick-fil-A. And so my creatives tell me that they want a cow hoof. And I'm like, where am I going to get a cow hoof from within 2 days? So I'm calling all these taxidermists. And they're like, we don't have that. I'm like, I really need this in 2 days. Can you find one? And they're all saying no. And then I find myself in a bidding war on eBay to buy a cow hoof from New Jersey. And it was neck and neck, but we won. And we got our cow hoof. So yeah, silly stories from working in fast food advertising.
Not to bring too much of a downer story necessarily, but one that I think is extremely important, and kind of going back to what Nick said about working in journalism, being able to jump on your feet when a major important story breaks and being willing to travel across the country to help cover it. Probably the most intense reporting whirlwind I had was when the events at Uvalde happened last year in Texas, the school shooting. I was tasked with jumping on a plane immediately after that happened and making my way to Texas. And part of my job is to get the interviews and speak to the people who are most affected by this horrific incident. And I won't sugarcoat it, that was pretty rough trying to talk to these people after the most horrific thing happened to them in their entire life. But what kept me going was knowing that, one, that this is an extremely important story that needs to be told. These people have had something happen to them, and it needs to be told, and change needs to happen. And one of the greatest things that journalists are able to do is it's up to them to get those stories out there. So speaking to the families, speaking to the people that were injured, speaking to the officers that responded, for example. Very difficult. That was a very difficult couple of days. But seeing the whole country and the whole world watching that coverage and reacting to it and calling for change was extremely, extremely rewarding. So that's something that I will never forget in my 5 years of working in the TV news business. Unfortunately, I'm sure there will be many more like that to come. But knowing that hopefully our coverage of these events, whether good or bad, might have an impact somewhere, and just being able to tell these people's stories and document it for years to come is really important. That's something that's very motivating, and that's what keeps you going through those challenging times. So if you are in journalism, if that's something you want to do, you do have to be prepared for sometimes you need to be telling these really rough stories. But again, the motivating factor in that is knowing that you can be, hopefully, a change in that. You can be part of making sure these stories never die.
I think interesting when you're hearing the stories of, a lot of your memorable stories are not necessarily the happy, funny ones, they're there, but also the importance, and I think to me it speaks to the power of communication, whether it's through ad campaigns or through a story you're telling, be it TV, print, be it through social media, be it through sports or entertainment, that the ability to communicate is really what kind of bonds all of us in this field together. So before I so guys out there start thinking about some questions, I'm going to open it up to those in a minute, and eventually, hopefully, we'll have Tony in here. But what I would like you guys to just kind of say before I open it up to the students is, what would you say is the most important skill that, or several, but that everyone needs to have if you're going to go out and do any kind of a career in this field of communication? What do you think is the most important skill or skills, I guess?
Be likable. Make sure you can talk to anybody and adapt to any situation. Networking is key. You want to be able to talk to somebody that you think you have nothing in common with, but like I said before, it's a communications industry. You have to develop those speaking skills and develop those skills to be able to connect with anybody, anywhere, at any time.
Hello.
Oh, Tony, do we have you? Are we hearing? Can you hear us and we hear you? Yay, all right, thank you.
I heard the voice echo and I was like, oh, look at here.
Well, welcome. Well, for everybody who you've seen this wonderful person sitting here, this is Tony. Why don't you give a quick introduction of who you are, and then as we're on the topic of maybe one of the most interesting experiences you've had, and then we'll come back to sort of your thoughts on, what skills would you give to people. But tell us who you are, what you're doing, and maybe a memorable experience.
Perfect. So my name is Tony. I graduated this past May in 2022. And since then, I started off being a journalist at WJCL News in Savannah, Georgia. And then I transitioned into doing YouTube full-time, so I'm a full-time content creator at this moment. And I also work with brands, primarily advertise online. So the best advice I can give since being a graduate, it definitely would be focus on yourself in terms of what your goals are. A lot of people try to tell you a track to follow, and I think that's the worst advice you can possibly get. I think you need to be able to know what's best for you and what works for you in terms of what makes you happy, because you can easily become miserable. And I know for a fact, my friends that are now starting to work, whether it's in communications or outside of that, they're very quick turning into what your kind of worst nightmare is, like just being strictly career oriented, not being able to enjoy yourself and enjoy life. And I think the best thing to do with that, not being miserable in your career, is to be able to do what you want to do, and just whatever makes you happy. So even if you're at a job that isn't making you completely happy, you need to have hobbies on the outside of that. So that's the best advice I could give. And being at Loyola in general, I think being involved in great companies is really helpful. I'm sure you guys are aware of Jay. Jay was amazing in terms of helping me figure out what I wanted to do outside of school. after I graduated, and he gave me so many opportunities. He got my first job at WJCL in Savannah, Georgia through an event. He had me sign up for the National Association of Black Journalists, which is known as NABJ, which is a conference that a bunch of students and people in the industry, in the journalism industry primarily, all come together and network a lot, and that's my job, just from being to a J and with that. So I think get involved with great if you are interested in journalism or just the communications field. I think that he's just amazing and phenomenal in helping our students figure out what they want.
And I think there's a lot to be said for the idea of finding out what you want to do and making sure you like it. As I think everybody's mentioned, it can be a job and it can be something you love, something you hate. But if it's something you really love, it's not even a job, as somebody once said. So continuing on, Nick, were you going to add as we're looking at talking about advice or what you would give?
Yeah. Well, I don't want to be too repetitive. I know I said earlier that writing is really important, and the ability to do that, and the ability to have compassion and empathy, and keep that front of mind at all times. I guess I would add to that, if you can demystify what you're doing for the people that you're talking to. I mean, we're talking about communication, and part of that communication is communicating with your sources and with the people you're writing about. People are, as Nick had alluded to, oftentimes you're talking to them at a very tough time for them. And when the human condition is to want to nurse your wounds and kind of close up, and what you're asking them to do is open up. And they might want to know why, and what is this going to look like? And you can't always make those promises because you don't always know what's going to go in the story. I mean, and plus it's not always up to you, it's editors as well. But too many journalists, I think, try to kind of keep the mystique alive, right? They don't want to overpromise, so they just don't say anything about what they're doing. They're just, I can't answer that, or we'll see. But I think, really sitting down with somebody and being able to have a heart-to-heart and say, well, this is what we're trying to do. The reason I'm asking you these questions, I'm trying to get at this idea of blah, blah, blah. I think that can really be a helpful tool as well.
And jumping off the aspect of communication, being a problem solver is incredibly important. Being someone who is solution-driven, because in this field, production especially, there's always going to be problems. There's always going to be something that pops up, and if you're a person who's solution-driven, it shines.
I think accountability is really big in this industry as well, especially in television. Every day is a new day. The show that happened yesterday doesn't affect the show that's going on today. The show that's going on today has no effect on tomorrow. If you mess up, everybody's going to mess up. It's important to hold yourself accountable, fix what you did wrong, and celebrate yourself when you do something good. I forget quite exactly who said it earlier, but no one's going to fight for you like you are. So it's important to celebrate your accomplishments while also fixing something that you're not too happy about for the next day.
Okay, I know as we're coming now, I want to kind of open up to you guys. Please feel free to step up to the microphone, ask away. What questions do you have? What do you want to know? What do you want to ask of all of our panelists here?
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for speaking with us. So I'm a senior at Loyola, Communication, Advertising, and Public Relations. And I think that my question, as I kind of look into applying for jobs and talking with alumni and then also just employers, what your advice would be with, like, for instance, looking at a specific company that has various roles open within the industry and then kind of deciding if I should go with one that I have a lot of experience in and I might be more comfortable with, or maybe if I should go for one that I don't have as much experience in but could be a great opportunity.
That's a really good question, and that's something that I found myself facing the past couple of years just in job switches too. And I would say, like, rule of thumb is if you can say that you can confidently do, let's say maybe like 50%, 60% of the job description, that's good enough. the point, you should not know how to do every single thing. And the whole point of like getting into a new job is to learn different things and meet new people. And I really feel like one of the biggest parts of that is like when you're interviewing for these roles is just to like really be yourself and show people that like you're willing to learn and you're willing to take on a bigger role. And so I would say definitely go for what you're not comfortable with, because you'll learn the most there and you will be the most accomplished. If you are just settling into your comfort zone all the time, I feel like you won't feel very fulfilled. So I would definitely say, if you can do some of it, that's good enough.
Anyone else? Other thoughts on that?
Yeah, and to go off of that, I mean, take advantage of internship programs, because if you're looking at like, I don't know exactly what industry you're like looking to do. What's your like focus necessarily?
Advertising and PR, but mainly like advertising.
Yeah, so if you're looking, obviously it's a little bit different than what I'm doing, but like a lot of these major PR firms and major like ad agencies, if they're a big enough company, they're going to have internship programs. And even if you think it's not necessarily a specific field that you're going to love, apply to the internship. It's not the end of the world if it's something that you end up not really loving or like feeling like you want to do for the rest of your life. But that's what internships are for. That's like, it's your opportunity to learn a little bit more, get the actual hands-on career experience that, there's only so much you can learn in a classroom, for example. And going into that knowing you're going to learn and build up your experience and build up your resume. I mentioned before that, in the communications field in general, everyone's path is different. Everyone's entry is different. So just being able to kind of slowly build up that like, broad skill base and build up that resume, whatever way you can do it is going to be beneficial in the end.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
What other questions do you guys have? I know, I see. Feel free, just come on up and ask.
Hey, hello all. So I have kind of two separate questions for you guys. So I learned that with a lot of jobs in communications, it's a lot about teamwork. A lot of you guys mentioned that. So what advice or question, or really like, can you answer the question of what do you do when you don't work well in a team? Or like advice you could give for those that don't work well in a team? And another question I have, what happens when you face burnout, especially being in such a creative field?
Oh, that's good. Anyone? Tony, too, feel free to chime in if you feel like you want to we'll kind of grab as you go.
So I could say something in terms of someone that's not being a team player. So when I was working at the news station, WJCL, there was one person on the team that wasn't exactly being a team player in terms of she felt as if I was there to replace her because I took over her shift when I first started there. And I think the best bet for you, because at first I was kind of like pushing under the rug because she was doing like kind of like small things that were, I would say, petty. And you just have to address it. And I know because it was like at the point where I didn't want to go to work. So it's like, I have to deal with this. I'm like, I don't want to have to deal with this energy. Like I'm really having to wake up and go to work every single day. And that's like something that's part of your life. And the best bet I would say is just speaking to that person. I spoke to her, I acknowledged, and I told her like, you're making me uncomfortable when you're doing this. So I'm asking you to stop. And I don't think it's necessary to bring it up to someone that is higher unless when you speak to that person for the first time, they don't fix that issue. So once we had that conversation, she did express her feelings in terms of her feeling like her job was being replaced. And I told her, like, that's not my goal here. I'm just trying to do my job. And if you feel that way, like you take it up with people that are higher up, with our news director at that time. So speaking to her, she apologized and there were no steps I needed to take after that. So I think definitely address it. And in terms of burnout, you have to be able to step outside of work once again and do other things outside of work that make you happy. And even that, I think everybody should find a hobby, a skill that's something that can be fun, like trying out yoga, go to the park, do a picnic date with your friends. That helps a lot. And I feel like once you are able to go out with people or go out by yourself and do something that excites you or that's fun, it really helps you feel refreshed and set for the new week.
My one piece of advice for not working well in a team is the difference between like not working well in a team in college, for me at least, and the real world, quote unquote. No one's giving you a grade anymore in a group project. Like every group project you have in the real world is your career on the line, not a A or a B or a C or a participation of a 0. So you just kind of have to keep that in mind, and you don't have to like everybody you work with. I think that sometimes when you're especially working with people your age, it's really easy to feel like you have to be friends with all of your coworkers. It's okay to keep a coworker. You have to be respectful and civil, and obviously that needs to be returned. That's really important. My one piece of advice for burnout is I know it's different for everybody. For me, it was to stop talking about work all the time. So I lived with people that I worked with during the pandemic, and we were going in every single day. We were on the same rotations. So they were all I had, and they were great friends of mine. But because we were bringing work home with us, talking about it all the time, sometimes we had to set boundaries and just say, okay, like we're watching a movie, we're not checking our email, we're not talking about work for the next hour, like things like that. Obviously that works for some and not others, but for me that was huge, not to bring work home.
For your first question, I would say the biggest thing is to leave your ego at home. When you go to work, you are there to complete a project, a task, and it's going to be in a group collective because no matter what the project is, you can't do it alone. And so your personal feelings towards anyone, unless it's something disrespectful beyond bounds, and that's a HR issue. But it's not about how you feel about the person, it's about making the best product and getting to the end goal in the best manner. And then for burnout, I would say, similar to Tony and Christina, just taking yourself out of your work setting every so often. Something that I do personally is once a month I make myself go volunteer somewhere. Has nothing to do with my job, just something that I just enjoy doing, to just remind myself that I'm a human, the service component of life, and just remembering that there's other ways to fulfill yourself in life.
Yeah, I don't know what field you wanted to go into, but journalism definitely is very collaborative. I don't think that, I think, you know, people talk about it in the context of journalism all the time because there's a creative element to it. And so when you're reporting something and you're writing something, you have this vision and you want that vision to be realized. And there are constantly people, it feels like, trying to tear you down, other reporters who have a different vision, and then editors who are telling you that your vision is no good. And I just think there's a constructive and a destructive way to have arguments. So I don't think that not being a team player is different from preferring to work on your own and having to adjust to becoming a team player. And I think if you can kind of learn, just focus on that balance between asserting yourself without making it personal and without tearing other people down, usually that ends up getting good results. If you can say to somebody, we're trying to get at the same thing here, I don't think this is the way to go about it. Usually you don't get too much crap for that. It ends up working out, but you just want to make sure that leaving your ego at the door is a really good way to put it. It's not just about you, right? It's about what you're trying to do. Burnout, Reuters has a peer network now where, we're in an age of increasing awareness about the impact of these jobs on mental health. And so finding an ally in your workplace who you can talk to about that stuff, hopefully your boss, would be cool. I just think expressing it, being honest about it, being upfront. I know it's hard to trust people with that kind of thing, but I find that most people are okay with it if you tell them, I need to sort of back off for, a little while. I recently started meditating 10 minutes a day.
Me too.
It's really helpful. So I would say that as well. That's it.
Can I ask another question?
Go for it.
All right. Just really quickly, are you guys happy? I know. But in the sense of in the position that you're in right now, or do you still feel, well, I know there is always room to grow in the career that you're in, but do you feel happy in the position that you're in right now? Or are you well, I feel like I could still do a little better?
I'll say real quickly, if you're not happy in your career, it's not the end of the world. You can always move to a different job or change. Don't ever feel like you're trapped if you're unhappy. And there's a difference between being happy and being content. You know, you might be content, and if your real goal is to continue to improve and to continue to move up in your career, continue to just keep going, you should always like try to find what drives you to keep moving forward. You know, running up the ladder at your job. You know, finding new ways to, if you're in a creative field, new ways to build your own brand, for example. Yeah, you know, you should try to find what makes you happy, whether that be, you know, like being creative or working towards and appreciating that final product when, you know, you're done with a major project.
So are you happy with your job?
Am I happy?
And where you're at?
Yeah, I'm definitely happy. You know, I mentioned it before, when, you know, you're working really hard on a particular story, or for me specifically, on a particular interview subject who might be not really willing to speak, and after, you know, days, possibly weeks, possibly months of talking to them and building a relationship and convincing them to, you know, tell your life story, it's really rewarding. And being able to find the happiness in, you know, being proud of yourself is great. I'm really happy when I'm able to see a story start from just a little idea to like fruition. It's really, really great.
Going off of Nick, the difference between like being content and being happy, I think there is some danger in being comfortable and content if happiness is what you're looking for. To be fully transparent, I wasn't happy for a little bit in my first job. My Fox Sports job that I'm at now is actually a job that I got in August, which is why I haven't drawn from too much experience there, because I'm still obviously relatively new. But I think if you find yourself being unhappy, no job is worth your unhappiness, no matter how much glitz or glamour you feel there might be. So just listen to yourself, and if you're ready for a change, take that change. Always be thankful, don't burn bridges. Always, you know, keep your connections, keep people close to you. But I think there's nothing wrong with taking steps for yourself in a whether it's the job itself, whether it's the people, whether it's the location. Like, if something is not making you happy for an extended period of time, of course, everybody has bad days, no matter how perfect your job is. It's worth adjusting, for sure.
So you're happy?
Yes, now I am.
You can ask everybody that.
I actually want to share a story. At my first job, it was probably a year in, I started feeling really stagnant. And I had a conversation with my boss because my supervisor had just moved to another agency, so I didn't have anyone directly monitoring me, and I wanted to talk about my progress. And in that in itself, me having to set that up instead of having a formal performance review, it showed me a lot. And then after that conversation, I knew that there wasn't going to be much upward mobility in that position. And this was January of last year. And so I was still doing my job, and then an offer came on the table to work at another place. And I was talking with them back and forth, and they made a formal offer that March. And I spoke to my supervisor again, and that's when they wanted to actually fulfill the request that I had. And it hit me that if I hadn't had another offer being interested in me, they would not have done that. And so I went with the offer. It was completely insane. I broke my lease, and I moved within 2 weeks to where I live now, and it was probably one of the craziest things that I'd done, and it stressed my mother out to no end. But sometimes you just have to take a chance on yourself when you know that you're not being fulfilled where you are.
Just to offer another perspective on it too, outside of the actual work that you're doing, what I find is something that's really important to me, and what makes me feel fulfilled in my job is who I'm surrounded with and what the company culture is like. I am very much an in-office person. I can't do the online work thing. So it's important to me that I am in an office that is comfortable for me. I'm surrounded by people who are hardworking and open-minded and willing to take on new challenges. It just makes me a better worker too. So outside of like being friends with your coworkers, something that's really important is just knowing who you're working with and if those are the type of people that you want to be working with. And that's something you could typically find out in the interview process. One of the questions that I ask in all of my interviews, it's always a hit every time, and it gives you a very good idea of what it will be like on your team, is I say, how do other teams at this company view the marketing team or the content team or whatever the team is? And you can always tell what their answer is going to be. They'll either roll their eyes and be like, oh, they just think we spend so much money and nothing ever happens. Then you know, okay, I'm probably not going to enjoy this. Or they're like, they think very highly of us and they go to us for challenging questions and they really respect our opinions. It's just a really telling question, so you guys are welcome to steal that one from me. But I would say like that's something that makes me feel content. I haven't started my new job yet, so I can't say if I'm happy in it yet. But I really love everybody that I interviewed with, and the company culture seems really great, and that's something that makes me really happy.
I'm not going to say happiness is a myth, but there is never that moment where you suddenly feel like I've made it, right? And it's really easy to fall into that place where you're thinking that every stepping stone you're at is like, okay, how is this going to help me get to the next thing? It's really important to pause every now and then and think, yeah, but this is the next thing from the last stepping stone, right? And it can help to think about what the you of 10 years ago wanted, and you have that now. And so that exercise is always something that I have to keep coming back to. And I think it's a really good exercise and just something to keep remembering that, like when I got the Puerto Rico bureau chief job, I was thinking to myself, what is this going to allow me to do when I get back to New York, right? What opportunities is this going to open up for me? Is it going to let me do the kind of writing I want to do? Well, yeah, but I mean, the me from 3 years before that, if you had told him, like, dude, in 3 years you're going to be the Puerto Rico bureau chief for Reuters, I would have been, like, over the moon, right? So you just have to kind of, like, try to keep perspective, I guess is the best way I can put it. And that's why folks have mentioned the difference between happiness and contentment is actually really important, fulfillment as well as what you're going for. Yeah, over the years, a lot of my friends have jumped to jobs at outlets that have a slightly larger presence, like say the Wall Street Journal. And it's hard not to have a little bit of, comparing yourself, but you play the long game and you realize, okay, if I went to those publications, I'd have to take on a beat that I maybe don't want to write about. I'd be boxed into that beat, right? At Reuters, I mean, it's a great company, but it doesn't have quite as large an international recognizable brand name, say, right, as the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. And so I sacrifice, that platform, I sacrifice, the Twitter followers, but I'm doing something cool every day, right? I'm writing about, I'm on the team I want to be on. I'm on a team I fought like hell to get on over many years, and I'm doing the kind of writing I want to do. So, there's always going to be a way that you are happy and a way that you're not happy, and it's really just an exercise of the mind, trying to keep yourself in the right framework.
Very true. Tony, do you want to take a stab, and then we've got a couple more questions?
Yeah, really quick. So I actually moved to Savannah, Georgia. So I moved here within a month after getting my job from New Jersey, drove down 12 hours to Savannah. And for this exact job to be a news reporter. And as I was working there, I wasn't feeling exactly fulfilled in what I was doing. And I know, similar to one of the other reporters that was speaking, in terms of everybody having an opinion, like it is teamwork when you are a news reporter, and not being able to have the story that I wanted to do, and not being able to get that opportunity. And then I had the platform YouTube, where my following was growing increasingly at this moment, and I was doing like my own stories on my YouTube channel. And I got to the point where I was like, what am I going to do? Should I stay at this job for however long I was going to stay here? Or should I just take a leap of faith and just do YouTube full time? And I had lots of talks with my parents. Once again, like Jade said, my mom was like, this is going to be like big if you do just leave. But she had faith in me. She knew that like whatever decision I'm making would be the best decision for me. And quite frankly, it's the best decision I ever made. I just hit 100,000 subscribers on my channel now, and being able to use my voice and be able to share stories that I want to share and have my own platform my own boss, like I am more than happy. And I just love what I do now. And that just goes back to taking that faith and trusting in you in any career, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're in a corporate company or anything of that such. Just always bet on yourself, and that's the key to happiness. Like I'm genuinely happy, and I love what I do. Like it's my baby, what I do now.
Thank you guys so much. I see a lot of themes of like just living in the now and like not wanting or waiting for what's to come next or anticipating what's to come next. So that's something I always try to keep in my life as well. So it's good hearing from people like you guys that that's still what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you for the question. All right. Next question, our last 3 questions here will go.
Hello. So you sort of earlier in the talk, I'm sorry if this question is a little too specific, but talked about sort of finding stories and it's like, oh, well, a tragedy happened, plain was obvious. So I guess what would you say to speaking when like a tragedy doesn't happen every day, but sort of like when there isn't sort of a very obvious story to find, how do you find the non-obvious stories? When like it's like, oh, well, you can't just do nothing until a tragedy happens. Like you have to be finding stories other ways. How do you engage in finding non-obvious stories, essentially?
For me, in sports, obviously, some sports write themselves. I found a lot of passion in looking for stories that obviously related to the sports story, but like quite weren't so. So for example, we were at the NBA Finals in Boston, and I found that there was a woman who had turned 100 who was a Celtic superfan. So I was like, we should do an interview on her, and like my producers were all in on it. So things like that. If you can just scour, I hate to say it, scour Twitter, scour Instagram. I follow probably 50 to 100 accounts that I have absolutely no interest in, but you never know what's going to spark an idea in your head. So it's always about paying attention to what you're reading, paying attention to what you're watching. You never know how those 2 factors are going to coincide and spark something inside of you.
Well, 2 things. One, I think that one's, we noticing when you have a question about something that you don't know the answer to, right? It's so easy to go through your day wondering, just sort of pondering weird things about the world, and then those thoughts just kind of float away. As a journalist, sometimes you learn to hold on to those thoughts and just start thinking more deeply about them. And a lot of really great investigative stories start out that way with somebody. Like for an example, there was a big story, I think, in Time a few years ago about why medical costs are so high. I mean, we've all asked that question, right? We've all gotten a medical bill and been like, what the hell, man? Like, I'm supposed to have insurance. But, it took a really smart journalist to say, well, let's dive into that. I mean, why are they so high? But I also think just that it's so case specific that it's hard to answer, because when you get a job, you're going to have a beat, you're going to have sources, you're going to have an editor working with you and guiding you. And that is the exact kind of question that you should ask your editor and that your editor will really like for you to ask. And I mean, I think, it's kind of meta to say, but asking that kind of question is part of the exercise of finding those stories. So.
Yeah, I have you kind of hit on the age-old, never-ending question of what does a journalist do when it's a slow news cycle. So that's a really great question, and a lot of us still kind of struggle with that sometimes. I would say for me, the best thing is to kind of always keep something in your back pocket that might not be a time-sensitive story. Like obviously you have the news of the day where X thing happens today, and that's going to be dominating the headlines for the next couple days. But you might have a slow news day, and maybe now it's the time to bring out that really cool story about this. Let's say a story that I was just recently pitched that I'm trying to work into a segment to air on GMA is a group of students in Carnegie Mellon University who helped develop a lunar rover, and they're like part of this team that's trying to get one of the first student-made lunar rover on the moon. That's an amazing story. It's not a time-sensitive story, so what's great about that is, that's something that I can develop for a while, and when there's like a slow news day and, thankfully nothing tragic happens that day, no meteors hit a major city, I always like to say, you can bring that out. Find a topic that you're interested in, develop that topic, develop that idea, And you can wait until the time is right to put it on your show, write an article about it, make a YouTube video about it, for example. Keep like a going list in your mind of topics that you are interested in. Maybe it's a half-developed idea, but on a day where you find time to work on it more, you can develop it into a full idea. Just kind of be open to what you're interested in and develop that.
Just time-wise, so we can move on to the last couple of questions, but you can all ask them and hear more afterwards when they meet with you. So thank you for that question. Very good one.
Yes. Hi, yes. My name is Malcolm Kiza. I'm a communications major, class of 2025. I do have two questions for all of you guys. And then I have one question for Tony and one question for Nicholas. But I'll just start.
I would just say, can you just pick your most important one, and then you can talk to them afterwards,
sure.
just for time.
Yeah, so the first question is, how has your working experience impacted you as a person?
That's a really good one. Who wants to start you off?
I'm going to attempt it. I haven't really thought it through, so let's see what I come up with. I would say I think I've learned a lot about myself over the past couple of years out of college. I was one of those people in college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. Still, I have no idea what I want to do, but I at least trust myself enough to know that I'm going to take opportunities that feel right for me and just learn as I go. So I would just say, like, in terms of knowing myself a bit more and being confident, it's definitely helped in that aspect. And I think that's the only thing I can think of right now, but yeah.
I would say don't forget that you have a life and a personality outside of what you do. It is very easy for people to get wrapped up in their job, but that is not the only part of you. That is a portion of you, but there's a you outside of what you do that you need to still nourish as well.
I would say definitely prioritizing mental health. In college, I was really someone I felt like, oh my God, like I'm just always good, like mentally there, because you have like a very strict schedule kind of in college. Like you have like, okay, this is what the next step's going to be. I have class, I have a final exam, I have a midterm, all that stuff. So I think definitely being able to kind of like what Jade said, like prioritize life outside of just working and just understanding that now that I don't have that structure, you kind of have to, you're building your life now, but just maintaining and trying to maintain your mental health as best as you can, because your mental health is incredibly important and you can watch it quickly deteriorate if you don't prioritize it.
For me personally, I think my job has impacted me the most in like my ability to adjust. Before I started working, I was very much the person who had a plan and stuck to it no matter what. And in a control room with breaking news, you have control over nothing. So being able to adapt and adjust, and looking back 4 years ago, I would never be able to do I would never be able to be as flexible as I am now, I think, without the job that I've had, which I've taken and translated into my personal life as well.
Super quickly, I would just say it expanded my worldview like a millionfold. Like I have alluded to a few times, just covering all these stories, writing about things that you don't know anything about, diving headfirst into cultures and events that you knew nothing about, has been amazing. And I just look back and cringe at how like ignorant and cringy I used to be as a kid. So it's been huge in that respect.
And I'll just say really quickly, back to the developing thing and growing, it's never linear. You're never going in a straight line, well, here's how my career is going. Sometimes you skyrocket, sometimes you stagnate for a little bit. That's not something to be discouraged about. Everybody has a different journey, everybody has a different path. And the important thing is momentum and, being able to continue on your path.
All right, I'm going to save the questions, for after, just because of time, because we're running out of time,
That's
and I
fine.
want to get to the last question. But thank you for that one. And they're here to talk more afterwards, so.
Okay, I'll be quick. But we were talking before, backtracking about being adjustable and adaptable, and like how our field in communication is obviously different than like a regular 9 to 5. My question is, how do you navigate setting workplace boundaries so that you're not overworking yourself? Because that's one of my fears, is that I'm gonna have to always be available, and obviously we need to prioritize our mental health like we're talking about. So if you guys have any advice.
Sorry, I'll be super quick on this. I will speak for certain parts of the communications industry. I can't speak for all because I don't have experience in it. I was working a variety of shifts on like the drop of a dime. Like I'd be called to do like a 7 p.m. to 4 a.m. shift, a 3 a.m. to 2 p.m. shift with like a week's notice, not even. People who, especially if you're involved in other things at work, most people in other departments are working 9 to 5. They would be emailing me at 9 a.m. after I just slept for 3 hours, et cetera. You got it, the schedules do not align. Somebody I noticed set a signature and it said, my hours are not your work hours. If I'm emailing you outside of your work hours, like do not answer me until you do. Obviously, not every job can be like that. Not everybody is as aware as that person was, but that always really stuck with me that there are people who, A, are setting their own boundaries, and B, want you to set your own boundaries too. So if you can, do it. If it needs to be in text, if it needs to be verbally told to somebody, like, I will get back to this in an hour, do it. Again, that's my experience. I was able to do that. Some places you can't.
I would say also working in broadcast, I have a very similar experience where, there are some times where you're kind of always expected to be on. And it's very intimidating at first. I always tell people that are, just starting at GMA, for example, it's not forever. The 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. shift is not forever. Unfortunately, if you're looking to work in like a news or broadcast role, you're probably going to have to be working on those shifts. But it's important to know that those are the shifts that you gain the most experience at, honestly. Christina, you probably, dealing with a breaking news situation at 3 a.m., you never forget that. But being able to do that helps you grow in your career, helps you grow in your position. And then you get to a point where you don't have to work the crappy middle of the night shift a lot. So it's very daunting, and I will say probably the biggest and most important factor when you're first starting out is being available. And I understand that that's very hard. It's very hard for us all. I think the encouraging thing is to keep in the back of your mind, it's not forever.
Thank you.
I would add one more thing to that. I just came off of a 7-day straight 14-hour shift. And a big thing to be is communicative. And I did that for 7 days straight. And then yesterday was my first day off after that. And I told them explicitly, I will be taking the rest of the week off to recoup from this. And I'm not the only person on the team. And so that's a big part of the producers where I work. We will all take shifts like that. That way not every person is being burnt out, but you have to advocate for that. Otherwise, people don't know.
I just want to say, are you guys unionized? Am I the only one who's... Reuters has a union. The News Guild is a big thing. And this is not advice so much as reassurance, because I'm not good at those boundaries. But I'm in a union, and they are good at enforcing the rules. And so maybe, that'll happen. And you'll end up at a place that's part of the News Guild. Yeah.
Tony, anything to add?
Definitely being able to set those boundaries once again. Like, there's been times, like, when I was working at the news station, I was working like 12-hour shifts at some points. But being able to say, like, hey, I need to get home. I barely had lunch because I was writing this story. And trying to put it all together. And they're, at least depending on where you're working at, they should be pretty understanding. And even if they're not, then you probably shouldn't be working there if you're working that many hours without any breaks. So definitely set those boundaries with wherever you're working.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank our panelists. They're going to stick around for a little bit and kind of hang out near the back table, so please feel free to come up and introduce themselves. Tony, I know you can't be with us, but I have your email. Can I connect people if they want to reach out and chat with
definitely.
you? Definitely. Well, again, thank you, panelists, so much for your time and experience and sharing it with our small but very interested crowd. I want to just thank you again on behalf of all of your Loyola history, as well as this here, and say wow, other than this, Nick, I have seen all of these students go from where you're at, no, you're not that old. You're just 2 years before I got here. But I do say that all these guys, everyone here was where you are at. And this is, you know, now we're there at places and they're still evolving and still growing. But there is, you know, I don't want to say like there is hope, but I want to thank you guys because there is hope that, you know, you will go out, you will get jobs, you will find what you want to do, you will move through that experience, and you have these people. Please introduce yourselves and meet them because they are connections and they're also incredible Loyola alumni, which, by the way, are the most important connections you're going to find is your Loyola alumni. They are your lifeline in a lot of things. So thank you again, panelists. Round of applause for